Millionaire is discovered single father studying medicine at construction site. What she did changed his life. Elizabeth Parker was having the worst day of her professional life. 3 cancelled meetings, 2 lost contracts, and now she had to personally go to the construction site of the new development because the engineer in charge had simply vanished without explanation. That's when she saw the man sitting alone in the corner of the concrete slab, completely oblivious to the movement around him. He was reading a thick book, the pages yellowed by time and constant handling. What caught her attention the most was his absolute concentration, as if nothing else existed at that moment. Elizabeth approached with firm steps, her high heels clicking against the still fresh concrete. The book had a familiar cover, very familiar. It was the anatomy textbook she herself had bought for college years ago, when she still dreamed of becoming a doctor, before abandoning everything to take over the family business. "This book cost more than $500 the last time I saw it," she said, her voice coming out harsher than intended. "Where did you get it?" The man slowly looked up. He had deep marks of fatigue on his face, but his gaze was firm and direct. "I bought it used at a used bookstore," he replied without changing his expression. "For $80. It took me 3 months to save up." 3 months? Elizabeth crossed her arms. "You work here, and it takes 3 months to save $80. When you have other priorities, yes." There was something about his calmness that irritated her even more. It wasn't defiance, it wasn't disrespect. It was just a statement of fact, like someone commenting on the weather. "Show me the receipt then," she insisted. "I want to make sure it wasn't stolen." The man sighed and closed the book carefully, as if it were something precious. From the worn corners and the notes Elizabeth could see in the margins, it was clear that this book had been read and reread countless times. "My name is Marcus Johnson," he said, standing up. "I've worked here for 4 months. I arrive at 6 in the morning and leave at 6 in the evening. During lunch break, I study. I don't have a receipt because I bought it at a university book fair, but I have the used bookstore stamp on the back cover if you want to see." "University?" Elizabeth let out an incredulous laugh. "You study." "3rd year of medical school," Marcus replied, opening the book and showing the stamp. "Public university. Night classes when I can make it on time." For a moment Elizabeth was speechless. She looked at him more carefully. He must have been about 30, maybe a little less. His hands were calloused, his arms strong from heavy work, but there was something different in his eyes, a determination she rarely saw. "How can someone who works at a construction site from 6 to 6 manage to study medicine at night?" she asked, genuinely curious now. "With lots of coffee and little sleep," Marcus gave a tired smile. "And with a 6-year-old daughter who needs medications that the public system doesn't provide." "You have a daughter?" "I do. And she needs me more than I need hours of sleep." Elizabeth felt something strange in her chest, a pang she couldn't name. There was a brutal sincerity in this man, a complete absence of self-pity that completely disarmed her. "I'm sorry for accusing you," she said, her voice softer now. "I didn't know." "Most people don't know." Marcus sat back down and opened the book again. "And they don't need to know. Everyone has their own battles." "What's your daughter's condition?" He hesitated, his eyes still fixed on the page. "Cerebral palsy. She was born premature, had complications. Her mother couldn't handle the pressure and left when Lily was 6 months old." "Lily," Elizabeth repeated the name softly. "That's a beautiful name. My grandmother chose it before she passed away. Said it was a warrior's name." Elizabeth looked around. The other workers were returning from lunch, and she realized she had spent over 15 minutes there talking to that stranger. Something completely out of character for her. "Listen, Marcus," she began, thinking quickly. "You need help. I can pay for your studies, help with your daughter's medicine, get you a better job." "No." The answer was so direct, it took her by surprise. "No, you didn't even hear what I have to offer." "I don't need to hear it." Marcus finally looked at her properly. "I've learned that nothing in life is free. And when someone offers help like that, out of the blue, There's always a price. I'd rather make it on my own. That's foolish pride. Elizabeth felt the irritation returning. Your daughter needs you to graduate, not to be proud. My daughter needs a father who teaches her that dignity is priceless. He stood up again. Thank you for the offer, but no. She stood there frozen as he walked back toward the construction site. The conversation was over, but something in her couldn't just let it go. It had sparked a curiosity, a desire to understand better this man who refused help when he clearly needed it so much. Elizabeth returned to the office but couldn't concentrate on anything else that day. That night, already at home, she caught herself thinking about Marcus and his daughter. A 6-year-old girl with cerebral palsy, raised by a father who worked all day and studied at night. How did he manage? Where did he find the strength? The next day, she returned to the construction site earlier than necessary. She found Marcus already working, carrying bags of cement with 2 other men. She waited for the lunch break, and when he sat in the same corner with his book, she approached him again. I came with a different proposal, she said, before he could dismiss her. It's not charity, it's work. Marcus raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I need a personal assistant for a few hours a week, Elizabeth continued. Administrative work, organizing documents, research, things you can do in your free time. I pay well and it's honest work. I don't have free time. Then make some. 2 hours on Saturdays, 4 hours on Sundays, whatever you can manage. And why me? You have a company full of qualified people. Because I need someone who understands the value of hard work, Elizabeth replied, and that was partly true. And because you're studying medicine, you can help me review some health-related projects the company is developing. It was a lie. The company had no projects in the health field, but she had stayed up half the night planning this, creating a plausible excuse to help him without hurting his pride. Marcus remained silent for a long moment. How much? $200 an hour. That's absurd. No one pays that for administrative work. I do, for specialized work. He studied her with that penetrating gaze. You're lying. There is no health project, is there? Elizabeth felt her face grow warm. It was rare for someone to read her so easily. No, she admitted, but I can create one, and you would actually be useful with your medical knowledge. Why are you doing this? Because I know the value of a used anatomy book, and I know what it means for someone to study like that with that level of dedication. I don't want you to give up because of a lack of resources. I'm not going to give up. I know, but you don't need to suffer so much in the process either. Marcus looked back at the book, his fingers tracing the notes in the margin. All right, he said finally, but on one condition. If at any point I feel this is disguised charity, I'm out. No discussion. Deal. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. And so it began. Marcus started coming to her office on Saturday mornings. On the first day, Elizabeth had prepared a stack of real documents that needed organizing, old contracts that needed scanning and cataloging, tedious work she'd been putting off for months. To her surprise, Marcus proved extremely efficient. He worked quietly, with the same concentration she'd seen when he was reading the anatomy book. He asked precise, sharp questions, never repeating himself. By the end of the second week, he fainted. Elizabeth had stepped out of the room for a few minutes to take a call, and when she returned, she found Marcus collapsed on the floor beside the desk, documents scattered. Her heart raced as she rushed to him, kneeling by his side. Marcus, Marcus, wake up. He opened his eyes slowly, disoriented. He tried to get up too quickly and staggered. Elizabeth held him by the arms. Easy, slow down. What happened? It's nothing, he murmured, running a hand over his face. I just stood up too fast. You fainted. That's not just standing up fast. I'm calling the company doctor. No need. I'm not asking. Elizabeth was firm, and 15 minutes later, Dr. Richard Wilson, the doctor who attended to the company's employees, was examining Marcus in one of the meeting rooms. When was the last time you ate something decent? Asked the doctor, checking Marcus's eyes with a penlight. This morning. You lied. When was it really? Marcus sighed. Last night, but it was enough. It wasn't. You're showing all the signs of severe anemia and malnutrition. You need blood tests. I don't have time for that. Then make time. Dr. Richard snapped his bag shut. Because the way you are, you'll faint again. And next time, it could be on the construction site lifting heavy loads. Have you thought about what could happen? Elizabeth was leaning against the wall, watching the scene with growing concern. When the doctor left, she approached Marcus. How many times a day do you eat? As needed. Marcus. Once, he finally admitted, not looking at her. Sometimes twice, when there's extra. Extra from what? From Lily's medication money. She needs 3 different medications. 2 the health clinic provides, 1 they don't. It costs $320 a month, plus the private physical therapy, because the Medicaid waiting list is 2 years long. Elizabeth felt something break inside her. He was literally starving himself to keep his daughter alive and maintain her quality of life. You need to accept help, she said, her voice coming out hoarser than intended. This isn't pride, it's stubbornness. Your daughter needs you alive and healthy. And I need to look in the mirror and respect myself, Marcus finally faced her. If I take your money, I'll feel like I owe you. And I don't want to owe anyone anything. Then consider it a loan. You pay me back when you graduate. What if I don't graduate? You will. You can't be sure of that. I can, because you're the kind of person who doesn't give up. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, clearly wrestling with himself. Elizabeth could see the internal battle happening, pride fighting necessity, stubbornness confronting reality. Okay, he said finally, but I want everything documented. Amount, term, interest, like a real loan. No interest. With interest. Otherwise I won't accept it. Elizabeth wanted to argue, but something in his stance made her back down. He needed this, needed to maintain some sense of control over his own life. Okay, with minimal interest. They drew up a simple contract that same afternoon. Elizabeth would lend Marcus $1,000 per month to be repaid over 5 years after his graduation with 2% annual interest. It was a ridiculously low rate, but he accepted it. The following month, things seemed to be improving. Marcus regained color in his face, was more alert, more present. The work at the office continued on Saturdays, and he started accepting snacks that Elizabeth always accidentally bought too many of during those days. It was on a Saturday morning that everything changed again. Elizabeth was reviewing some documents when she heard raised voices at the reception. She left the room and found Marcus arguing with the secretary, and beside him was a little girl in a wheelchair. I know I wasn't supposed to bring her here, Marcus was saying, clearly embarrassed, but the lady who takes care of her called saying she had a family emergency and can't stay today. I have no one to leave her with. It's okay, Elizabeth approached before the secretary could respond. It's not a problem at all. That's when she really looked at the girl. Lily had long brown hair, tied in a slightly crooked ponytail, dark and bright eyes that watched her with intense curiosity. She wore a light pink dress and colorful sneakers, and there was a small backpack hanging from one of the chair's handles. Hi, Elizabeth said, crouching down to be at the girl's eye level. Are you Lily? The girl nodded but didn't speak. She's shy with strangers, Marcus explained, his hand resting protectively on his daughter's shoulder. Lily, this is Ms. Elizabeth. This is where Daddy works on Saturdays. It's a pleasure to meet you, Lily, Elizabeth smiled. Your dad talks about you a lot. Lily finally smiled back, a small but genuine smile. Come on, let's go to my office. Elizabeth stood up. I'm sure we can find something interesting for you to do while your dad works. Elizabeth's office was large, with a seating area with comfortable sofas in addition to the work desk. She settled Lily there, pulled some books from a shelf and placed them on the low coffee table, along with paper and colored pencils from a cabinet. Do you like to draw? She asked. Lily nodded enthusiastically this time. Then make yourself at home, and if you need anything, just call, okay? During the next 2 hours, Elizabeth tried to focus on work, but her eyes kept returning to Lily. The girl drew with absolute concentration, her tongue slightly appearing at the corner of her mouth as she tried to hold the pencil with fingers that clearly had difficulty with fine movement. What really impressed Elizabeth was when Lily started flipping through one of the books there. It was a technical book about business administration, definitely not suitable for a 6-year-old. But Lily seemed fascinated, running her fingers over the words, her eyes scanning the lines. "Can you read?" Elizabeth asked, unable to contain her curiosity. Lily looked at her and nodded. "Can you read a little bit for me?" The girl opened her mouth, and when she started reading, Elizabeth felt a shock. The voice was slightly slurred, the words came out with effort, but she was indeed reading. And not just reading, but understanding, because she stopped to explain in her own words what she thought the text meant. "My God," Elizabeth murmured. "You're very smart." Lily gave a shy smile and returned to drawing. But that discovery stayed with Elizabeth, a 6-year-old girl with cerebral palsy who read at a much older student's level, who understood complex concepts. What was that child's potential? What could she achieve with the right resources and support? When Marcus finished his work, Elizabeth called him for a private conversation, while Lily continued drawing in the next room. "Your daughter is exceptional," she said directly. "Her intelligence is well above average." "I know," Marcus replied with evident pride in his voice. "Her schoolteacher said the same thing, but it's hard to get the right stimulation for her." "What kind of stimulation?" "Books, activities, specialized therapies. Everything costs a lot. I do what I can, but—" He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Elizabeth understood perfectly. "I can help with that," she offered. "Not as a gift, but as part of your work here. You can bring her on Saturdays. I'm sure we can find educational materials she can use." Marcus studied her for a long moment. "Why are you doing all this?" It was a fair question, and Elizabeth wasn't sure she had an honest answer, or at least an answer she could voice without sounding strange or intrusive. "Because I see potential," she said finally, "in you and in her. And I think it's a waste to let that potential be lost for lack of resources." "Is that all?" No, it wasn't all. But Elizabeth couldn't explain the feeling she had when she looked at Lily, a mix of admiration, protectiveness, and something deeper that she preferred not to examine too closely. "It's enough for now," she replied. From that day on, Lily started accompanying Marcus on Saturdays. Elizabeth brought books from home, educational games, art supplies. She talked with the girl, listened to her surprisingly insightful observations about the world, saw the sparkle in her eyes when she discovered something new, and in the process, she began to get attached. It was dangerous, she knew. She had no right to get so involved in these people's lives. But she couldn't help it. Every smile from Lily, every small achievement, every moment the girl called her by name with that strained but determined voice, all of it was creating bonds that Elizabeth didn't know she needed. One day, Marcus had to leave the office early to go to the university for an important exam. Elizabeth offered to take Lily home later, since she had the address written down for the loan contract. When she arrived at the location, her stomach turned. It was an outlying neighborhood of Chicago, with narrow streets and houses squeezed tightly together. The building where Marcus lived was one of those old, poorly maintained ones, with peeling paint and broken windows covered with plastic. She climbed to the 3rd floor on narrow, dimly lit stairs, carrying Lily in her arms because there was no way to bring the wheelchair up. The apartment was a tiny room, literally one small room with a tiny kitchenette and a bathroom that barely fit one person. There was a single bed where father and daughter clearly slept together, a makeshift bookshelf with book fair boxes full of books, and a small table with 2 chairs. The walls were covered in mold, and the smell of dampness was strong. Lily didn't seem ashamed. On the contrary, she proudly pointed out every corner of the space, showing her drawings taped to the wall, her few but well cared-for toys in a box by the bed. "It's small, but it's ours," she said with that strained voice. "Daddy painted the walls blue because I asked him to. He said blue is calming." Elizabeth felt her eyes sting. How did that man manage it? How did he raise a daughter in those conditions, study medicine, work in construction, and still keep everything clean and organized? The bedding was simple but impeccable. Everything had its place. There was evident care in every detail. "It's very nice," she said, her voice coming out huskier than she intended. "Your dad did a great job." But when she returned home that night, she couldn't get it out of her head. Lily needed a better place. The mold was clearly affecting her breathing, which was a little labored even without exertion. That place wasn't suitable for a child with compromised respiratory conditions. Elizabeth spent the following days working out a plan. She looked for apartments in the area, nothing too far away to raise suspicions, but in much better condition. She found a small 2-bedroom in a newer building with an elevator, well lit and no moisture problems. She negotiated with the landlord, rented it under her company's name as if for an employee. Then she came up with the story. She called Marcus on a Tuesday afternoon. "The building where you live is going to undergo emergency renovations," she said, trying to sound casual. "Serious structural problem. They'll need to vacate for at least 3 months. "How do you know this?" His voice immediately sounded suspicious. "The construction company doing the work is a partner of my company. I received the list of affected addresses today. Yours is on it." "I haven't received any notification. It should arrive in the next few days. But I'm telling you in advance because I know that with Lily, you need time to get organized. I have a contact for a temporary apartment that might work if you want." There was a long silence on the other end. "Elizabeth, tell me the truth. Is this real, or are you making up excuses to help me again?" She hesitated. Lying was getting easier, and that bothered her. "It's real," she said finally. "You can check with the building management if you want." She had anticipated this, and had an employee call the management earlier, making up a story about a preventive inspection. It wasn't exactly a renovation, but there were indeed some structural issues that would need to be addressed eventually, enough to make her story plausible. "All right," Marcus said finally. "I'll check, but if you're lying—" "I'm not." It was a half-truth, the worst kind of lie. Marcus accepted the temporary apartment. Elizabeth helped him move over a weekend, hiring a small moving company and saying it was a courtesy from the construction company. When they entered the new place, Lily's face lit up in a way that made Elizabeth's heart tighten. "Daddy, look, I'm going to have my own room." The apartment was simple, but had everything they needed. 2 bedrooms, living room, kitchen, full bathroom, well lit, no mold, on the 3rd floor but with a working elevator. Elizabeth had furnished the basics, saying the furniture was already there from the previous tenant. Marcus walked through the rooms in silence. Elizabeth tried to read his expression but couldn't. He just observed everything with that characteristic intensity, touching the walls, opening the windows, checking every detail. "It's much better than the other one," he said finally. "Too good. You deserve something good. It's not about deserving, it's about how much this must be costing. It's included in the renovation. Temporary accommodation for the residents." Elizabeth. The way he said her name made her tremble slightly. There was an accusation there, a sadness, a disappointment. "You're lying to me. Again." Marcus. 3 months. You said 3 months of renovations. But renovations like that take at least 6. And this apartment is too furnished to be temporary. You did this, you rented this for me. Elizabeth opened her mouth to deny it, but the words didn't come out. He was right. He had always known, deep down, maybe from the start. "And what if I did?" she retorted, defensiveness emerging. "Your daughter was getting sick in that place. The mold was affecting her breathing. Didn't you see?" "Of course I saw." Marcus raised his voice, then quickly looked at Lily, who was exploring her room, and lowered his tone. "Of course I saw. Do you think I don't know that? Do you think it doesn't eat me up inside every day not being able to give her better? Then accept help. Not like this. Not with lies. I trusted you. And I'm trying to help you. Manipulating me." The words echoed in the empty apartment. Lily appeared at the bedroom door, her eyes wide, sensing the tension in the air. "Daddy?" Marcus took a deep breath, forcing a smile. "It's okay, Princess. Go check out your new room." When Lily went back inside, he turned to Elizabeth. "I need you to leave." "Marcus, please, just leave." Elizabeth left, her chest tight and eyes burning. She had tried to do a good thing and had ruined everything. She had crossed a line without permission, had disrespected his autonomy, had done exactly what he had asked her not to do. In the following days, Marcus didn't show up at the office. He didn't answer calls or messages. Elizabeth knew he was still working on the construction site because she discreetly checked with the engineer in charge, but he was clearly avoiding any contact with her. It was on a Thursday 2 weeks later that she received an unexpected visit. The secretary announced over the intercom that there was a woman wanting to speak with her about Marcus Johnson. The woman who entered the room must have been about 50 years old, graying hair pulled into a bun, simple but clean clothes. She had the same direct gaze as Marcus. "My name is Dorothy Johnson," she introduced herself. "I'm Marcus's mother." Elizabeth stood up, surprised. "It's a pleasure to meet you. Please, have a seat." "I'll be direct." Dorothy remained standing. "My son told me everything. About the work here, about the money, about the apartment." "Mrs. Dorothy, I can explain." "Let me finish. He told me everything and he's furious with you. But I came here because I need to say one thing." The older woman took a breath and Elizabeth saw tears in her eyes. "Thank you. Thank you. For caring. For seeing my son for who he really is, not just as another construction worker. For seeing my granddaughter as the brilliant girl she is. For trying to help, even if in the wrong way. I didn't do it the wrong way out of malice. I know. But you don't understand what it's like to be poor and proud. You don't understand that sometimes it's easier to go hungry than to accept charity. Because when you accept charity, you lose a piece of yourself." Elizabeth sat down slowly. "I just wanted Lily to have better conditions. And she does now. Marcus doesn't want to admit it, but the apartment is doing her good. Her cough has lessened. She's sleeping better. He sees that every day and hates himself for not being able to provide it on his own. But he couldn't, not with all the expenses he has. And you think he doesn't know that?" Dorothy finally sat down. "He knows. But knowing doesn't make it easier to accept. What do I do then? How do I help without hurting him? Give it time. And when he comes back, because he will come back, you need to be honest, completely honest about everything, about why you're doing this." "I don't know why I'm doing this," Elizabeth admitted quietly. "I just know I have to." Dorothy watched her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You lost someone, didn't you? Someone you loved very much." Elizabeth felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under her feet. No one asked that. No one noticed. She kept that part of her life so closed off, so guarded. "A daughter," she said finally, the words coming out for the first time in years. 8 years ago. I'm sorry. She was 4 years old. Such a stupid accident. She fell into the pool during a birthday party. I was working, I arrived late. When they got to the hospital, it was too late. The tears finally fell, and Elizabeth didn't try to hold them back. I worked myself to death after that. I took over the company completely, threw myself into it head first, because if I stopped working, I had to think. I had to feel. And I didn't want to feel. And now Lily makes you feel again. Yes, and it's scary and wonderful, and I don't know if I have the right to feel these things. Dorothy reached across the table and held Elizabeth's hand. You do, but you need to be honest about it, with Marcus and with yourself. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. A month passed. Elizabeth respected Marcus's space and didn't try to contact him. She kept quietly paying the apartment rent through the company, not expecting anything in return. It was the least she could do. It was a Monday morning when he showed up at her office. Elizabeth was reviewing contracts when her assistant announced he was there. "Send him in," she said, her heart racing. Marcus entered, and she immediately noticed he looked different, thinner, more tired. But there was something different in his eyes, too. A resolution, perhaps. You need to stop paying for the apartment, he said without preamble. I won't stop. Elizabeth. Marcus, listen to me, please. Just give me 5 minutes. He hesitated but finally nodded and sat down. Elizabeth took a deep breath. Honesty, Dorothy had said. Complete honesty. When I saw you at that construction site reading that book, I saw my ex-husband. He was like that too. Determined, focused, studying medicine. We met in college. I dropped out when my father got sick, took over the company, and he graduated. We got married, had a daughter. She paused, her hands trembling slightly. Emma. Our little Emma. She was cheerful, curious, full of life, and I was always working, always. Because I needed to prove that a woman could run the company as well as my father, so I missed birthdays, school plays, simple everyday moments. Elizabeth, you don't need to... I do. You asked for honesty. It was her 4th birthday. A big party, lots of people. I was in an important meeting, said I'd get there as soon as I could. When I arrived, they'd already taken her to the hospital. She'd gone to get a ball that fell in the pool and slipped. Nobody saw in time. Tears were flowing freely now. She was in a coma for 2 days. On the 3rd day, the doctors said there was no more brain activity. We turned off the machines. And I wasn't working then. I was there, holding her hand, but it was too late. I'm sorry, Marcus said quietly. My marriage didn't survive. My husband blamed me for not being there. I blamed myself for not being there. We divorced 6 months later. He remarried the following year, has 2 kids now. I threw myself into work and stopped feeling anything. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. Until I saw you with Lily, the way you care for her, how you dedicate yourself, how you sacrifice everything for her. And when I met her, when I saw that brilliant girl who could have everything ahead of her if she had the right opportunities, something inside me woke up. You became attached to her. Yes, and I know it's selfish. I know I have no right. She's not my daughter, not my granddaughter, not my responsibility. But when I'm with her, when I see her smiling, when she calls me by name with that strained but determined voice, I feel like a part of me that was dead comes back to life. Marcus stayed silent for a long time. Elizabeth waited, her heart in her throat, prepared for him to say she was being inappropriate, invasive, that she needed to stay away from his daughter. She asks about you, he said finally, every day. Where's Aunt Lizzie? When are we going to see Aunt Lizzie? Why did Daddy fight with Aunt Lizzie? I'm sorry. I didn't want to put you in that position. You lied to me, manipulated me, did exactly what I promised I'd leave if you did. I know, but you also gave my daughter something I couldn't give her, a decent home, clean air, her own room. And when my mom told me about your daughter, I understood a little better. He stood up and started pacing the room. I don't accept charity. But if you're doing this because Lily helps you in some way, if it's an exchange, maybe I can handle that. Maybe it's not so bad to accept help if you're also getting something out of it. I am, Elizabeth said quickly. Every moment with her is a gift. She reminds me why life is worth living, why it's worth feeling. Then let's try again, but this time with honesty. No lies, no manipulation. If you want to help, ask me. If I want to accept, I accept. If I don't, you respect that. Can you do that? I can. And about the apartment. I'll pay half the rent. It's what I can manage. The rest you can consider as payment for the company Lily provides. She likes you, and that's priceless. It was a compromise. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and honesty was what they needed. Agreed, said Elizabeth. In the following months, they built a new routine. Marcus kept working at the construction site and studying, but now with slightly better conditions. Lily started going to the office on Saturdays again, and Elizabeth began visiting them at the apartment once a week, always giving notice beforehand, always respecting boundaries. It was during one of these visits that she found Marcus crying in the kitchen, a letter in his hand. What happened? She asked, alarmed. My college professor sent this letter. He showed her the paper. I'm going to lose my scholarship. Why? Absences. I have too many accumulated absences. I can't make it to all my classes because I need to work. And sometimes Lily has episodes and I have to take her to the hospital. They understand the situation, but there's a minimum attendance requirement. Elizabeth took the letter and read it quickly. It was true, Marcus was 2 absences away from automatically losing the scholarship and having to drop out. Is there any alternative? There is. I can request a special arrangement, take classes online and do in-person exams, but it requires a strong justification and a recommendation letter from someone influential. I'll write the letter. Elizabeth, it's not charity, it's an honest recommendation letter. You work for me, I can vouch for your competence and dedication, and your situation with Lily is more than valid justification. Marcus hesitated, but finally nodded. He was learning to accept help, little by little. Elizabeth didn't just write the letter. She discovered that the college dean had been a close friend of her father's. She made a call, explained the situation, asked them to consider Marcus's case with special attention. She didn't ask for favors, just that they look at it with humanity. And it worked. Marcus got the special arrangement, but just when things seemed to be stabilizing, fate decided to test them all again. Lily started having seizures more and more frequently. The doctors adjusted her medication, but nothing seemed to work for long. She began having episodes of intense pain, screaming and crying, with no one able to do anything to relieve it. It was after a particularly difficult night that Marcus showed up at Elizabeth's office, completely shattered. "She needs surgery," he said, his voice breaking. "The doctors finally figured it out. There's a malformation in her spine that's getting worse. If she doesn't have surgery soon, she could lose even more movement. She could become completely paralyzed." "What's the cost of the surgery?" "They do it through Medicaid, but the wait list is at least a year. And she doesn't have a year. The doctors were clear. It needs to be within the next 3 months, or the chances of success drop drastically." "And privately?" Marcus gave a bitter laugh. $80,000. Could be 60 if we find a hospital willing to negotiate. I could work 3 lifetimes and not save that much." "I have it," Elizabeth said immediately. "No. Marcus, it's your daughter's life." "And what's the price of accepting? What will I owe you afterward?" "Nothing. For God's sake, nothing. It's Lily." "Exactly. It's Lily. She's my daughter. And I need to be able to save my own daughter." "But you can't. Pride won't save her." They yelled at each other for almost an hour. Elizabeth had never seen Marcus so upset, so desperate, and he had never seen her so insistent, so willing to do literally anything. In the end, they made another agreement. Elizabeth would lend the money. Marcus would pay it back in 10 years with low but real interest. She would have to agree to be included as a responsible party for the child in the medical documents, not because she had rights, but because the hospital required 2 responsible adults for high-risk surgeries on minors. The surgery was scheduled for 3 weeks later. The surgeon was one of the best in the country in pediatric neurosurgery, Dr. Michael Robertson, with an impressive success rate. Elizabeth used all her contacts to ensure everything was perfect. The best room in the hospital, the best team, the best equipment. She wanted to give Lily every possible chance. 1 week before the surgery, she received a call from the hospital. "Miss Parker, I'm sorry to inform you that Dr. Robertson has cancelled Lily Johnson's surgery." "What do you mean cancelled? Why?" "He received an offer to operate on another patient on the same day, a case that would pay double. Since Lily's surgery would be done at a discount, and at a time he considers less convenient, he chose the other one." Elizabeth felt fury rise like lava. "He can't do that. We have a contract." "Technically, he can cancel up to 72 hours in advance, and we are offering a full refund." "I don't want a refund. I want him to operate on Lily." "I'm sorry, but the doctor's decision is final." Elizabeth hung up and immediately picked up the phone again. She called every contact she had in the medical field. She needed another surgeon with the same competence, and she needed it fast. Time was running out. It was after 3 days of a frustrating search that she discovered something. Dr. Michael Robertson, the surgeon who had cancelled, was her ex-husband. Elizabeth hadn't seen him in 7 years. Since the divorce, they had avoided any contact, but now she had no choice. She needed to confront him. She scheduled a meeting at his office, posing as a new patient. When she entered the room, he was visibly shocked. "Elizabeth, Michael. He had aged well, she had to admit. A few more lines, a little grey at the temples, but still the handsome, charming man she had met in college 20 years ago. "What are you doing here?" "You cancelled a surgery for a 6-year-old girl named Lily Johnson." "Oh, it's about that. Look, Elizabeth, it's a professional decision. It's nothing personal. You're letting a child suffer because another case pays more? I'm a sought-after professional. I need to prioritize my cases. She's not a case. She's a child. And you care so much because—" Michael studied her with that clinical gaze she had always hated. "Oh, I see. You found another child to replace Emma." The words were like a slap. "Don't talk about her." "Why not? It's been 8 years, Elizabeth. You can't live in the past forever." "I'm not living in the past. I'm trying to help a girl who needs surgery. And by any chance, are you paying for this surgery?" "Yes, of course, always trying to buy your absolution. Money won't bring Emma back, Elizabeth. I know that." "Do you? Because it seems like you're trying to save this child to feel better about not saving ours." Elizabeth felt the tears come, but she refused to let them fall in front of him. "Will you operate on Lily or not?" "No. I already said I have another commitment." "I'll pay triple what the other patient is paying." "It's not about the money at this point. It's about me not wanting to get involved in your redemption attempts." "This is about you still being angry with me," Elizabeth accused. "You want to punish me and you're using an innocent child to do it. Don't be dramatic. There are other surgeons. Not with your success rate in this specific type of malformation. You know that. You're the best. And you're letting a little girl suffer out of revenge." Michael stood up and went to the window. "You destroyed our family, Elizabeth. You always put work before everything. And when we lost Emma, you couldn't even grieve properly. You had to go back to work a week after the funeral. Because if I stayed home, I would have gone crazy. Every corner of that house had her in it, Michael. Every photo, every toy, every memory. I needed to escape." "You needed to feel, but you never knew how to do that. And you felt too much. You drowned in the pain and dragged me down with you." They stayed silent for a long moment, the full weight of those years of unprocessed pain hanging in the air between them. "Operate on Lily?" Elizabeth asked, her voice softer now. "Please, not as a favor to me, but as the doctor you are, as the man who once wanted to save children. She's not to blame for our past." "I need to think." "There's no time to think. The ideal window is 3 weeks. We've already lost one." "I said I need to think, Elizabeth." She left the office with no guarantee. She spent the following days trying to find alternatives, but no other surgeon had the specific experience needed. And time was running out. It was Marcus who found out, through a casual conversation with a nurse at the hospital. "The surgeon who cancelled Lily's surgery is your ex-husband?" Elizabeth was in the office when he entered without warning, his face red with anger. "How did you find out?" "The nurse mentioned he commented about an ex-wife who works in construction." "How many of his ex-wives work in construction, Elizabeth?" "Marcus, I can explain." "You went to him and asked? You humiliated yourself for that man?" "I did what I needed to do. For God's sake, don't you understand? I don't want to owe anyone any favors, least of all someone who clearly has something against you." "Then what do you want me to do? Let your daughter suffer because of your pride?" It was the worst fight they'd ever had. Marcus was absolutely furious, not about the attempt to get help, but about how Elizabeth had exposed herself, putting herself in a vulnerable position, and Elizabeth was furious because he seemed more concerned with pride than with his own daughter's health. "You don't understand," Marcus finally shouted. "She's all I have. The only good thing left from a marriage that ended, from a life that fell apart. And I need to be able to take care of her on my own." "But you don't have to be alone," Elizabeth shouted back. "Why is it so hard to accept that someone cares, that someone wants to help not out of pity, but because they love you?" The words came out before she could hold them back. The silence that followed was absolute. "You love us," Marcus said slowly, not as a question, but as a statement. "Yes," Elizabeth admitted, tears finally falling. "I do. I love Lily as if she were my own granddaughter, and I care about you more than I should. And I know I have no right. I know you have your own lives and I'm not really part of them. But I can't help it. Marcus stood there, processing. Elizabeth waited, her heart in her throat, expecting rejection, expecting him to say she had crossed all boundaries. "My daughter loves you too," he said finally. "She calls you Aunt Lizzie, but when it's just us, sometimes she slips and says Grandma. She knows you're not, but in her mind you're the closest she has. Marcus, and I care about you too, more than I should, considering you're my boss, my creditor, my benefactor. It's all confusing and complicated and probably wrong. It's not wrong. It feels wrong. It feels like I'm taking advantage of your generosity. You're not. I'm taking advantage of having you in my life. You saved me, not the other way around." They looked at each other for a long moment, all the weight of unspoken emotions finally coming to the surface. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The next day Michael called. "I'll operate on Lily." Elizabeth almost dropped the phone. "Really? But on one condition. I want to talk to her father, without you present." "Why?" "Because I need to know if he understands the risks, if he really wants me to do this, and if he's not being pressured by you to accept a surgery he doesn't want." It was a strange condition, but Elizabeth wasn't in a position to argue. The meeting between Michael and Marcus took place at a coffee shop near the hospital. Elizabeth waited outside, nervous, not knowing what was being said. When Marcus came out an hour later, he looked thoughtful. "He'll do the surgery, and he won't charge anything beyond the hospital costs." "What? Why?" "Because we talked. About you, about the situation, about everything. He's a jerk in many ways, but he's a good doctor, and he understands what it means for a father to fight for his daughter." "What exactly did you talk about?" "Dad stuff." Marcus gave a half smile. "He told me about Emma, showed me pictures, told me how you were before everything fell apart." "He did that?" "He did. I think he needed to talk to someone who understood what it's like to love a daughter so intensely it hurts, and I needed to understand you better. And you understand now. I understand why you became attached to Lily. I understand why you need to help so much, and I understand why it's so hard for you to accept that you need help too." "I don't need help." "Yes, you do. You're so busy saving everyone that you forgot to save yourself." The words echoed in Elizabeth for days afterward. Marcus was right. She had spent 8 years building walls, working non-stop, avoiding feeling anything real, and now that the walls were coming down, she didn't know how to handle the vulnerability. The surgery was scheduled for Monday morning. Elizabeth arrived at the hospital at 5 in the morning, even though the surgery wasn't until 8. She found Marcus already there, sitting in a waiting room chair, Lily sleeping in his lap. "You're here early," he said. "I couldn't sleep." "Me neither." Elizabeth sat beside him, looking at Lily. The girl was so small, so fragile in her father's arms. It was hard to believe that in a few hours she'd be on an operating table, doctors cutting into her spine, trying to fix a malformation that caused her so much pain. "What if it goes wrong?" Marcus asked quietly. "What if I'm making the wrong decision?" "You're not. She needs this surgery. But what if she doesn't survive?" "She will survive." Elizabeth held his hand. "Michael is the best. He'll take good care of her." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I know him, and no matter his flaws, he's never left a child on the table. Never." At 7:30, they came to prepare Lily. She woke up confused and scared, starting to cry when she realized where she was. "Daddy, I don't want to," she sobbed. "I know, Princess." Marcus hugged her tight. "But you need to be brave. Just a little while longer, and then you'll feel better. No more pain." "Do you promise?" "I promise." Lily looked at Elizabeth. "Aunt Lizzie, will you stay too?" "I'll be right here waiting for you." Elizabeth knelt beside the gurney. "And when you wake up, we'll have a surprise waiting." "What surprise?" "It wouldn't be a surprise if I told you," Elizabeth forced a smile. "But it's something very special." They took Lily to the operating room. Marcus and Elizabeth stayed in the waiting room, a heavy silence between them. There was nothing to say, just wait, hope, and trust that everything would work out. Dorothy arrived an hour later, bringing coffee and donuts that no one could eat. She sat across from Marcus, holding her son's hand. The surgery lasted 6 hours, 6 hours of torture, each minute feeling like an eternity. Elizabeth paced back and forth, unable to stay still. Marcus remained seated, his eyes fixed on the operating room door, his posture tense like a stretched rope. Finally, Michael came out. He was still in his surgical gown, mask pulled down to his chin. He looked tired, but when he looked at them, there was a small smile on his face. The surgery was a success. Marcus broke down. He just broke down right there, his body shaking with sobs of relief, so intense it was almost painful. Dorothy hugged him, crying too. Elizabeth stood there, her legs trembling, trying to process the information. "Is she okay?" she managed to ask. "She is. We completed the full correction of the malformation. She'll need time for recovery, intensive physical therapy, but the chances of her regaining even more movement are very good, and the pain should stop completely." "Can I see her?" Marcus asked, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "She's still in recovery, but in an hour you can go in, one at a time initially." Michael looked at Elizabeth. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" They moved to a more secluded corner of the hallway. "Thank you," Elizabeth said, "for doing this, for being professional. You don't have to thank me, I did my job. Still, thank you." Michael was silent for a moment. Talking with Marcus made me think about us, about what we had, about how we lost everything. Michael: "No, let me finish. I blamed you a lot for losing Emma. I blamed you for working too much, for not being there. But the truth is, I worked too much too. I also missed events, moments, and when she was gone, it was easier to put all the blame on you than to accept that we both failed." Elizabeth felt the tears returning. "We both loved her. We just didn't know how to love each other in the midst of the pain." "No, we didn't. And I'm sorry for being so cruel to you all these years, for refusing to operate on Lily just to hurt you. That was petty and small. You operated, in the end you operated. Because that man reminded me why I wanted to be a doctor, why I wanted to save children, not for money, not for status, but because every child deserves a chance." He paused. "And because you deserve to be happy, even if it's not with me, you deserve a second chance. Michael, take care of him, and the girl. They need you, and you need them." He turned and went back to the operating room, leaving Elizabeth there alone in the hallway, processing everything that had happened. 8 years of pain, guilt, anger, hurt. And suddenly, an absolution she didn't know she needed. Not complete, it never would be, but enough for her to start breathing again. When they finally let Marcus in to see Lily, Elizabeth waited with Dorothy. The older woman watched her with a gentle expression on her face. "You love my son," Dorothy said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, and your granddaughter. And that scares you." "A lot. I don't know if I have the right to love again after losing so terribly last time." "Love isn't about rights. It's about courage, and you have more courage than you think." Marcus came out of Lily's room with red eyes but smiling. "She woke up. She asked for you." "For me?" "For you. Go in." Elizabeth entered the room. Lily was very pale, with several tubes and monitors attached, but her eyes were open and bright. When she saw Elizabeth, she tried to smile. "Aunt Lizzie." "Hi, sweetheart." Elizabeth approached the bed, holding the girl's small hand. "How are you feeling?" "Tired and sore, but the doctor said the bad pain will go away." "It will. You were very brave. What's the surprise?" Elizabeth laughed through her tears. "The surprise is that you'll be able to do so many things now. The doctor said with physical therapy, you can regain even more movement. You might be able to walk with help. You can do so many things." "Really? Really?" Lily fell silent for a moment, her eyes welling up. "Aunt Lizzie." "Yes?" "Can you be my grandma?" Elizabeth felt her heart stop. "Lily, I know you're not really, but Daddy said family is who we choose, not just who shares the same blood. And I choose you." Elizabeth couldn't hold back the tears. She bent down and hugged Lily carefully, trying not to disconnect any of the tubes. "I would be honored to be your grandma." "So it's official?" Lily asked, serious. "Completely official." When Elizabeth left the room, she found Marcus waiting. She went straight to him, and without thinking, hugged him. He was surprised for a second, but then returned the hug, holding her tight. "She called me Grandma," Elizabeth murmured against his chest. "She asked if I could be her grandma. And you said yes." "I did. I know I should have asked you first, but—" "Elizabeth," Marcus gently pulled her back to look into her eyes. "You've been part of the family for a long time. It was just time to make it official." The following months were of slow but steady recovery. Lily needed to stay hospitalized for 3 weeks, then 2 more months of rest at home with daily physical therapy. Elizabeth was there at every possible moment, helping Marcus, taking care of Lily, being the grandma she had promised to be. And in the process, her relationship with Marcus began to change. It was no longer employer and employee. It was no longer benefactor and beneficiary. It was something deeper, more equal, more true. It was one night, after Lily had finally fallen asleep, after a particularly difficult physical therapy session, that they really talked. They were sitting on the apartment sofa, exhausted. 2 cups of tea forgotten on the coffee table. "I'm graduating in 6 months, Marcus said suddenly. "I know, it seems surreal. And there's an opening for a pediatric neurosurgery residency. It's competitive, but my advisor thinks I have a chance." "Of course you do. You're brilliant." Marcus chuckled softly. "I never thought I'd get this far. There were so many times I wanted to give up. When Lily was born and her mother left, when we found out about the cerebral palsy, when the medications cost more than I earned. Every day was a battle not to quit. But you didn't quit." "No, but I wouldn't have made it alone either, no matter how much my pride wanted to believe that." He turned to look at her. "You saved me, Elizabeth, and Lily. You showed up at that construction site like a hurricane, all stiff and suspicious of me, and changed our lives completely." "You changed mine too," Elizabeth admitted. "I was so lost, so stuck in the past, in guilt, in pain. And you gave me a reason to look forward again." "There's something I need to tell you." Marcus took a deep breath. "I love you." Elizabeth was breathless. "I know it's complicated," he continued quickly. "I know there's the age difference, the social gap, the whole story of how we met. But I can't pretend I don't feel this anymore. I love you, not out of gratitude, not out of obligation. I love you for who you are, for the amazing person I found behind the cold facade." "Marcus, you don't have to say anything back. I just needed you to know." "I love you too," Elizabeth said, the words coming out in a whisper. "I was so afraid to admit it, so scared that it might be wrong, that everything was so confusing it couldn't possibly work out. But I love you." They kissed there, on the old couch in the small apartment, under the dim light of the lamp. It was a gentle kiss, full of promise, of all the possibilities the future could bring. When they pulled apart, Marcus pulled her close and she rested her head on his shoulder. "How do we make this work?" he asked. "Practically, I mean. Slowly, with honesty. No lies, no manipulation. By being ourselves." "I think I can do that." "Me too." They stayed there for hours, talking about the future, making plans, dreaming together. For the first time in a long while, they both allowed themselves to believe that good things could happen, that suffering wasn't permanent, that love could exist again. But life, as always, had a few more surprises in store. 2 weeks later, Elizabeth started feeling unwell. Nothing serious at first, just excessive tiredness, some dizziness, difficulty concentrating. She attributed it to stress, to the sleepless nights caring for Lily. It was Dorothy who insisted she see a doctor. "You're pale, Elizabeth, and you're shaking even though it's not cold." "I'm just tired." "You're sick. Go to the doctor," Elizabeth went just to calm Dorothy down. She didn't expect the tests to reveal anything serious, but they did. Multiple sclerosis, a degenerative disease that would progressively affect her nervous system. There was no cure, only treatments to slow the progress. It could take years to progress significantly, or it could be aggressive and fast. When the doctor gave the diagnosis, Elizabeth felt as if the flaw had disappeared. She had just found a reason to live again, and now this. She didn't tell anyone at first. She went through the treatments in silence, taking the medications, doing the therapies. But the symptoms got worse. The dizziness became more frequent. She started having coordination problems. Her right hand trembled constantly. It was Marcus who noticed. "Elizabeth, what's going on with you?" They were in the apartment and she had just dropped a cup of coffee because her hand simply didn't obey the command to hold it. "Nothing, I'm just tired." "Don't lie to me, I study medicine, remember? I recognize neurological symptoms when I see them." "Marcus, you're sick and you didn't tell me." The accusation hurt more than it should have. "I didn't want to worry you all. You already have so much to deal with." "And you think you have the right to decide that alone? After everything we've been through, all the conversations about honesty, you think you can just hide that you're sick?" "It's different." "How is it different?" "Because I'm the one who helps. I'm the one who's always strong. I can't be the one who needs help." The words exploded from her, all the frustration and fear she had been holding back. "I spent 8 years being strong, 8 years building this life where I don't need anyone, and now I have a disease that will make me depend on people. That will make me weak." "Do you think I'm weak?" Marcus asked softly. "Because I needed help?" "Of course not." "Then why would you be?" Elizabeth had no answer. He was right, and she knew it. But knowing didn't make it easier to accept. "What do you have?" he asked, his voice softer now. "Multiple sclerosis." She saw the impact of the news on his face. Marcus knew what it was. He knew the progression. He understood the implications. "How long have you known?" 3 months. 3 months, he repeated, incredulous. "You kept this for 3 months." "I didn't know how to tell you. We had just started. Everything was so good, and I didn't want to ruin it." "Ruin it?" "Elizabeth, relationships aren't just about sharing the good parts. They're about being together through the bad parts, too. But you already have so much in your life. Lily, your studies, the residency coming up. You don't need a sick girlfriend." Marcus pulled her closer to him. "You don't get it, do you? I don't love you despite the problems. I love you, period. With problems or without problems, sick or healthy. That's the promise we make when we love someone. But it will get worse. I'll need help with basic things eventually, and I'll be here to help, just like you were here for me and for Lily. It's not the same thing. It's exactly the same thing." They told Lily that night. The girl listened with the seriousness of someone much older, processing the information. "Are you going to be okay, Grandma?" she finally asked. "I'll do the best I can, my love. Then we'll take care of you, like you took care of us." So simple in a child's mind, so complicated in reality. Marcus immersed himself in studies about multiple sclerosis. He began consulting his professors, searching for the latest research, understanding the available treatments. And it was during one of these searches that he discovered something. There was an experimental treatment being tested in some hospitals in Brazil, a combination of therapies that was showing promising results in slowing or even reversing some symptoms in early stages of the disease. The problem was that the treatment was expensive and wasn't covered by health insurance yet, and the waiting list for the experimental program was long. Marcus used every contact he had, everything he had learned about the healthcare system in those years. He spoke with professors, doctors, researchers. He secured an interview for Elizabeth in the program. When he told her, Elizabeth was speechless. "You did this for me?" "I did, and I'll keep doing everything I can. Because you deserve to fight just as much as any of us." The treatment started 3 months later. It was intensive, draining, but Elizabeth clung to it with everything she had. She wanted to live. She wanted to see Lily grow up. She wanted to see Marcus graduate. She wanted to build a life with them. And slowly, very slowly, it began to work. The symptoms stabilized, some even improved slightly. It wasn't a cure, it never would be. but it was a chance to have more time, more life, more moments with the people she loved. Marcus's graduation happened on a sunny December morning. He was nervous, adjusting his gown every 2 minutes, checking if the medal was in the right place. Lily was in the audience with Elizabeth and Dorothy, wearing a beautiful pink dress that Elizabeth had bought for the occasion. She had improved so much in recent months. Physical therapy was working wonders, and she could already stand with help, take a few steps with a walker. When they called Marcus's name, the entire auditorium applauded. He had become something of a legend at the college, the man who worked in construction while studying medicine, who raised a daughter alone, who never gave up even when everyone expected him to. Elizabeth was crying even before he went up on stage, crying with pride, with happiness, with everything that moment represented. All the sleepless nights, all the skipped meals, all the sacrifices, all. Everything had been worth it. Marcus received his diploma with a smile so big that Elizabeth could see it even from far away. When he returned to his seat, he did something unexpected. Instead of sitting down, he took the microphone. "Excuse me," he said, his voice echoing through the auditorium. "I know it's not protocol, but I need to do one thing." The college director seemed surprised, but motioned for him to continue. "When I started college, I was alone. Completely alone except for my daughter and my mother. I had no money, no prospects, not much beyond stubbornness and determination. And honestly, I didn't think I'd make it this far." He looked directly to where Elizabeth was sitting. "But then I met a woman who changed everything. A woman who saw me reading a book at a construction site and instead of just walking by, stopped. Who offered me help, even when I insisted I didn't need it. Who loved my daughter as if she were her own. Who taught me that accepting help isn't weakness, it's courage." The auditorium was completely silent now. "Elizabeth Parker, are you there?" Marcus said, pointing. "Could you stand up for me?" Elizabeth felt her face grow warm, but she stood up, trembling. "This woman saved my life and my daughter's life, and I was so busy with my pride, so convinced I needed to do everything alone, that I almost lost the best thing that ever happened to me." He stepped down from the stage and began walking toward her. "In recent months we discovered she's sick, and even sick, even scared. She remains the strongest person I know. And I realized I want to spend the rest of my life giving back everything she's done for me. Not out of obligation, but because I love her more than I ever thought possible to love someone." Elizabeth covered her mouth with her hands as he knelt before her. "Marcus, what are you doing?" "Something I should have done a long time ago." He pulled a small box from his gown pocket. "Elizabeth Parker, will you marry me?" The auditorium erupted in applause and cheers. Lily was clapping so hard she nearly fell off her chair. Dorothy was crying, and Elizabeth was completely shocked. "You can't propose to a woman at your graduation." "Yes, I can. I just did," he smiled. "So, what's the answer?" "Yes," Elizabeth said, laughing through tears. "Yes, yes, yes." Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple silver band with a small diamond that he had managed to buy with his first residency paycheck. It wasn't much, but to Elizabeth, it was everything. He stood up and kissed her right there in the middle of the auditorium, amid applause and whistles from his classmates. When they finally separated, Lily was there, Dorothy having brought her over. "Does this mean Grandma is really going to live with us?" she asked. "Yes, it does," Marcus confirmed. "If she wants to." "I want to," Elizabeth said, hugging them both. "I really want to." The wedding took place 3 months later, in a small, intimate ceremony, only close family and some dear friends. Dorothy was Elizabeth's matron of honor. Lily was the maid of honor, walking down the aisle with her walker and a smile that lit up the entire room. Michael was there too, invited by Elizabeth. They had truly made peace in recent months, finding an unlikely friendship in the ashes of what their marriage had been. He had even brought his new wife and children, and surprisingly it wasn't awkward. When Marcus and Elizabeth exchanged vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. They promised not just love, but partnership. Not just to be together in the good times, but especially in the bad. They promised honesty, respect, and space to grow as individuals while building something together. Life after the wedding wasn't a fairy tale. Elizabeth's illness had bad moments. times when her symptoms worsened and she needed more help. Marcus had moments of exhaustion from his residency, sleepless nights at the hospital, intense work pressure. Lily had difficult phases at school, struggling with physical limitations and with children who didn't understand, but they faced everything together, like a real family. Marcus specialized in pediatric neurosurgery, eventually becoming one of the best in the region. He had a special talent for dealing with frightened children, an empathy that came from having been a father struggling alone for so long, and he instituted something unique at the hospital where he worked. A program where parents in difficult financial situations could work at the hospital in exchange for treatment for their children. Nothing degrading, nothing exploitative, but a chance to maintain dignity while caring for their children. It was the same kind of chance he had received passed forward. Elizabeth continued running the company, but with a different perspective. She implemented support programs for employees, especially those who were single parents or had children with special needs. She created a daycare in the building, offered flexible hours, understood that personal life and work needed to coexist, not compete, and she created a foundation that offered scholarships for single-parent students, that helped families with children with disabilities, that provided the resources that Marcus and so many others never had easy access to. Lily grew up being the central inspiration of this foundation. As she got older, her exceptional intelligence only became more evident. She devoured books, asked complex questions, understood concepts that many adults struggled to comprehend. With continuous physical therapy and some complementary procedures, she gained more mobility. She would never walk completely without assistance, but managed to trade the wheelchair for crutches and then for canes. And every achievement was celebrated as the victory it was. When Lily was 15, something extraordinary happened. Elizabeth was having a particularly difficult day with the sclerosis. The tremors were strong, she had trouble standing. Marcus was at the hospital performing emergency surgery, and Lily was at home doing homework. Elizabeth tried to get up from the couch and her legs simply gave way. She fell, hitting her head on the coffee table. "Grandma!" Lily dropped her books and came as fast as she could. Elizabeth was a bit dazed, with a cut on her forehead, bleeding. "I'm fine, my love, I just need a moment." But Lily didn't wait. She picked up the phone and called her father at the hospital, explained the situation with impressive clarity for a panicked teenager. Then she grabbed the first aid kit and, with hands that trembled slightly but were firm, cleaned the cut and applied a bandage. "Did you learn from Daddy?" Elizabeth asked, impressed. "I learned from both of you, and from the medical books you leave all over the house." When Marcus arrived home 20 minutes later, he found Lily sitting beside Elizabeth, monitoring her blood pressure with the device they kept at home, watching carefully for any sign of concussion, as she had read she should do. "You did everything right," Marcus said, pride evident in his voice. "It was perfect." "I want to help people," Lily said that night during dinner. "I don't know how yet, but I want to do what you do. I want to make a difference." And she did. 3 years later, at 18, Lily was accepted into one of the best universities in the country to study law. She had decided to specialize in disability rights, wanting to fight in the legal system for people like her, who needed a voice and advocacy. The university was in another city, and the farewell was difficult. Elizabeth cried, hugging her granddaughter at the airport, not wanting to let go. "I'll visit every weekend I can," Lily promised. "And I'll call every day." "I know. It's just hard to let you go." "You never really let me go." Lily held Elizabeth's face with her hands. "You're here," she touched her own heart. "Always." Elizabeth looked at that young woman Lily had become. Strong, intelligent, compassionate. So different from the scared girl in the wheelchair she had met years ago, but with the same essence, the same determination. "I love you so much," Elizabeth said, "more than words can express." "I love you too, Grandma, and thank you for everything, for stopping at that construction site and seeing Daddy, because you cared, because you loved us when no one else did." Life went on. The years passed. Elizabeth had her ups and downs with the illness, but the treatment kept working better than anyone expected. She never became as debilitated as the doctors had feared, maintaining a reasonable quality of life. Marcus became head of the pediatric neurosurgery department at the hospital. He published research, trained new doctors, saved countless children. But he always said his greatest success wasn't professional. It was the family he had built. Lily graduated from law school at the top of her class. She opened a practice focused on defending the rights of people with disabilities, winning important cases that set precedents. She became a powerful voice, using her own story as inspiration for others. And then came the day that changed everything again. Elizabeth was 72, Marcus was 65, Lily was 35. They were gathered in the big house Elizabeth had bought years ago, large enough for the whole family, when Lily visited with her husband and 3 children. Yes, 3 children. Each one unique, each one loved. And none had inherited Lily's cerebral palsy, something she was thankful for every day, but which also helped her better understand the fears her parents had faced. It was a Sunday family lunch. Dorothy had prepared her famous pot roast. Everyone was talking at once, the children running around the backyard. It was chaotic and loud and absolutely perfect. Elizabeth was sitting on the porch, watching everything with a smile. Marcus came to sit beside her, bringing 2 glasses of juice. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "That 19 years ago I was completely lost. I was living mechanically, with no real purpose, no love, no joy. And then I saw a man reading a book at a construction site." "And suspected he had stolen it," Marcus laughed. "And suspected he had stolen it," Elizabeth agreed, laughing too. "Best mistake I ever made. It wasn't a mistake, it was fate." "You believe in that? In fate?" "I believe some things are bigger than us. Some connections are so strong they'll happen one way or another. And we, Elizabeth Parker Johnson, were inevitable." Lily came out of the house at that moment, leaning lightly on an elegant cane she used more as a precaution than out of real necessity at 35. "Grandma, Dad, the kids are asking when we're making the cake. Jacob said it's great-grandma Dorothy's birthday and she needs cake." "Great-grandma," Dorothy complained from inside the house. "I'm not that old." "You're 93, Mom," Marcus yelled back. "Yes, you are old. Respect your elders, young man." Everyone laughed. That was the family dynamic. Light teasing, full of affection, constant laughter, love in every interaction. As they prepared the cake and sang happy birthday to Dorothy, as the children played and the adults talked, Elizabeth looked around and thought about how much life could change, how one moment, one choice, one connection could alter the trajectory of everything. She had gone to that construction site 19 years ago as a cold, closed-off woman dead inside, and she had left having found not just a good employee, but a family. She had found purpose, love, a reason to live again. Marcus had gone to work at that construction site as a desperate, proud man, determined to do everything alone, and he had found someone who taught him that letting people in, that accepting help, that loving and being loved, wasn't weakness. It was the greatest strength there is. Lily had grown up knowing she was loved unconditionally, that her limitations didn't define her, that she could be anything she dreamed of being, and she had become exactly that. Years later, when they decided to make a documentary about the foundation Elizabeth had created, they asked her what the crucial moment had been. The moment that defined everything. "It was when I stopped," she said simply. "When I stopped walking, stopped judging, and truly saw. I saw a man who was fighting so intensely to build a better life. I saw potential where others saw just a construction worker. I saw humanity where others saw statistics. And I chose to care." "And what message do you have for the people watching this?" the interviewer asked. Elizabeth thought for a long moment, then smiled. "Stop, see, care. You never know how a moment of attention, of compassion, of simply caring, can change not just someone else's life but your own. We are all connected in ways we don't fully understand, and sometimes saving someone is actually saving yourself too." The construction site where it all began was demolished years ago. In its place, they built a children's hospital, a state-of-the-art hospital with the best equipment, the best doctors, and in the entrance hall, there's a plaque. Lily Johnson Children's Hospital, founded by Elizabeth Parker and Marcus Johnson, because every child deserves a chance. And below it, a photo, a framed photo of Marcus, young, sitting at a construction site, reading an anatomy book. And next to him, years later, a photo of him wearing a white coat, holding the same book, now as a graduated doctor. Between the two photos, a simple phrase: never give up, never stop dreaming, never underestimate the power of someone who believes in you. It was there that Lily took her children every year on the hospital's anniversary. She told the story of the grandfather who worked as a construction worker while studying medicine, of the grandmother who was brave enough to stop and see potential where no one else did, of how one choice, one moment, one connection created a ripple that kept expanding years later. And Elizabeth and Marcus's grandchildren listened, fascinated, understanding that they were part of something bigger, that they carried a legacy not of money or status, but of compassion, determination, and love. Elizabeth lived to be 83. Multiple sclerosis eventually took its toll, but she fought every day, lived every moment, loved every second. And when she finally passed, it was in peace, surrounded by everyone she loved, knowing she had lived a life that mattered. Marcus lived to be 91. He continued operating until he was 80, only stopping when his hands no longer had the necessary steadiness. But even after, he kept teaching, mentoring, inspiring. And when he passed, it was with a smile, knowing he had achieved everything he dreamed of, and more. Lily continued her legal practice until she was 60, when she finally retired to travel the world with her husband, giving talks, inspiring others, telling the story of the extraordinary family she had. Her children took different paths. One became a doctor like his grandfather, another an engineer, another a teacher. But they all carried the same values, the same compassion, the same determination to make a difference. And the foundation that Elizabeth created continued, generation after generation, helping single-parent students, supporting children with disabilities, creating opportunities where none existed. Because in the end, that's what it was about. Not about money or success. It was about seeing people, truly seeing, and choosing to do something about it. It was about an anatomy book read at a construction site, about a woman who stopped to question, about a man who had the courage to accept help, about a girl who proved that physical limitations don't define potential. It was about family, not just by blood, but chosen, about love that overcomes differences, challenges, illnesses, about building something bigger than yourself. And when the youngest great-granddaughter of Elizabeth and Marcus turned 6, the same age Lily was when she met Elizabeth, she asked her great-grandmother Lily about the family story. Lily, now 82 years old, with completely white hair but a mind still sharp, smiled. "Once upon a time," she began, her eyes sparkling with memories, "there was a lost woman and a struggling man, and they met at a construction site, surrounded by concrete and steel, and built something stronger than any building. They built a family. They built a legacy. They built love." "And did they live happily ever after?" the little girl asked. "They lived," Lily gently corrected. "They truly lived. They had happy moments and sad moments, easy times and hard times, but they lived every moment with truth, with love, and with purpose. And that, my dear, is better than any fairy tale." End of story. And now, dear listener, tell us, what did you think of this story? Have you ever stopped to truly see someone beyond appearances? Has pride ever stopped you from accepting help? Did Elizabeth and Marcus inspire you? We'd love to read your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more moving stories like this. Your presence here made all the difference.